Okay. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again for what is going to be our seventh Sochology Edu-Series session. My name is Mudassir Bogish, and I'm also joined by our technical director Amna Nazir. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please mute yourself during the session. We absolutely love getting questions as it creates a fantastic dialogue, and we also learn a whole lot more. So please type them into the chat, and we'll bring them up as the session progresses. So thank you. Today's topic is a super important one. It gives me nervous butterflies just thinking about it, and that's acing your first 90 days as a product manager. It's that absolutely critical time period as you join product in any organization. And with us today is one of Product Soch's very own Sarrah Moiz. Sarah is currently a product owner at Bobtail. That's a fintech startup that seeks to reduce inefficiencies in the supply chain side, so which I think the whole world could use right now. She's also been the force behind launching multiple enterprise B2B products. From being in the trenches with the engineers to engaging customers, she's had a ton of experience to help us understand what to do in those first 90 days in product. Sarah, good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. We're excited for you to educate us on this topic. We all know how getting that new job seems like the hardest thing in the world, but then when we actually start, and suddenly that's the hardest thing in the world. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and insights on how we can excel as we take on new product journey. So take it away.
All right. Thank you, Mudassir. That was pretty much a very generous introduction. Without wasting any time, now I just go ahead and share my presentation. Are you guys able to look? Thank you. Acing your first 90 days as a PM. Just a big disclaimer right here. Every organization is different, which is why the need of each organization is different. When you join an organization, their expectations with what you would be able to achieve within those 90 days is also going to differ based on which industry you've joined, which stage your product is. Is it in its infant stages? Is it in its growth stages? So on and so forth. There is no perfect recipe to acing your first 90 days as a PM, but there definitely is sort of like a way to go forward in structured steps and get through some of your early wins. So today's agenda is going to span these few key discussion points. We're going to be looking at your first week, then we're going to be looking at your first 30 days as a PM, and what you should be doing in those 30 days, what should be the milestones that you should be covering, your first 60 days, the next 30 days span, and then your first 90 days. And that's how we are going to be covering the entire span of your 90 days. Let's kick it off. First of all, in order to get a better idea of who else has joined us today, I'd like to do like a quick poll in order to understand the variety or diversity of the PMs who have joined us. So please use the comment section to let us know if you're a senior PM, group PM, an associate, or a junior PM, or somebody who's in another position as an aspiring PM to sort of go ahead and join a product team. Senior PM. Okay. All right, I think let's move on as the answers come in. First week. I'd like to call it the week of espresso chats. And mind it, it's espresso. But I like to call it espresso because I like to ensure that people realize it's more of something where you go ahead and express yourselves. Um, I believe it's important for you to break the ice with the teams within your organization with whom you're going to be now working with, whether or not they are part of the product team or they're part of the engineering team or they're part of the marketing team. Since we realize that product lies at the heart of being a liaison between all of these teams, it's very important that you make them feel at ease rather than they feel uncomfortable with a new addition in the team. How do you go about these espresso chats? I would rather suggest having a conversations with the entire team in one board meeting room, that just gives the kind of a vibe where you're trying to, crush the current things and trying to introduce something different, right? I would rather suggest have one-on-one conversations. um, One of my ways of going about it is making sure that I ask a silly question, for as an icebreaker, right? What was the biggest mistake that you did, in terms of breaking production? And I think those are the funniest stories that come up when I'm talking to my engineers. And I have to go back and tell them that it's okay that you made those mistakes. And they come up telling me that their managers or their leads were, actually had the same idea when they failed and when they made those mistakes. Because again, we want to be able to have that culture where, you learn by making those mistakes and you don't do that again. Make the conversation about them. This is very important. I feel like when you're having like a conversation with somebody, you're somebody new in the organization, you're having a conversation with somebody else. It's very important that you ask them about how things have been going, and what they feel they could have a little change about, or what they feel that they're currently facing problems in, right? Rather than making the conversation about the role that you've signed up for, rather than making the conversation about the backlog, rather than making the conversation about the features that they're going to be sort of, going ahead and developing in the sprint. Make the conversation about what could make them feel at ease. Because essentially speaking, as a product manager, your job is also to ease the lives of the people that you work with, right? Build connections. I think that the third part is more of a byproduct of how you carry out the first and the second. So as soon as you ensure that, you're trying to, hit on the right points, and connecting on a broader level, I think that's where you create a professional rapport that could go very long term, in your you know tenure as a PM in that organization. I think that's something that I would conclude the first week with. I do not want to. Sorry, are you speaking, listener?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I do not want you guys to think that first week is something where you have to dig deep into stuff, or maybe, get something out as a tangible, product of whatever you worked on in those first 5 days within your organization. Let's move on to the first 30 days, where now the question that you're supposed to be asking is, where are you headed in this organization? Where are you headed as a product? The three major milestones that I feel like, something that you could focus on is doing a stakeholder tour, trying out the product yourself. I cannot emphasize on it enough. And asking as many questions and as many questions as, you feel like asking. And by that, I'm gonna proceed to the next slide, where in stakeholder tour, it's very important that you realize that your mantra is supposed to be that you want to grow together. If you understand this term as something very, I would say, at the heart of what you're trying to do here, that's when you realize that both stakeholders, you as well as the stakeholder involved, is growing towards the value that they want to be creating. So, for example, you want to ensure what exactly is it that your manager is expecting out of your, out of you being in addition to the team. So, talk to your manager, have a one-on-one conversation, ask questions like, at the end of the first 90 days, what would you have, what would you have achieved as, a new addition to the team? As those 30 days proceed, you're going to see that the alignment that you have had with your manager is going to help you. Sorry. Okay. The alignment that you've had with your manager is going to help you align your items accordingly. Other than that, your team is of utmost importance. After having a one-on-one with your manager, I think it's very important that you talk to your team and you understand what matters to them. There are certain teams that are also very invested into what goes into the product, and this is where the conversation becomes very interesting, but because you want to understand from a technical standpoint, from their own point of view, as to why is the backlog arranged the way it is, what are they currently working on, how are the sprints carried out, what are the roadblocks that they're currently facing, how are they dealing with those roadblocks, is there an existing backlog, so on and so forth. These are questions that you want to ask in order to assess better as to what is the current standing of your product. If you do not have that cleared out or aligned within the you know uh, f- first few days of your tenure, that's when I think going forth, people will expect that you already have idea about those questions, which is why, again, the point number 3, ask a lot of questions, as many as your customer. Stakeholder tour, the most important. um, there are certain organizations where I realize that you might not get the access to directly go about and talk to your customers there and then. It's very important at that point that you form a communication channel with those who are already closer to the customer. So for example, your sales team members, for example, your team members from the customer success team who are talking to the customers, uh, filing through their complaints, replying back to them, so on and so forth. But if you have a chance to talk to your customers, make sure you don't take it for granted. Go on those calls, try and understand why exactly is it that they're using your product, and what is their, I would say, what is their pain point that the product resolves in order for them to proceed.
Yeah. All right, so that's great. Just want to add a couple of comments on that as well. Um, what I found in like kind of the first week or two, it's you're gauging the work, but I think you're also gauging the attitudes of the people around you, right? Including your manager. And what I found helpful is to be kind of upfront. Hey, like this is kind of my work style. I'm pretty straightforward, and this is kind of how I operate. Would love to hear your feedback on that, to see if there's any. So what that allows to do is it allows you to avoid that conflict that you might have, that might be kind of stewing underneath. So I think it's important. And then just to your point, I think most people underestimate how many questions they can ask. There are no stupid questions. You're allowed to ask as many questions as you want, and whatever question you want, and people actually want you to do that. I think it's only once you pass that time period that you mentioned, like that 30 days, if you don't ask those questions, the expectation is going to be like, well, why didn't you before when you had the chance? So just wanted to add on to that. That's great points. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, about the questions, that's exactly what I've seen working out for junior PMs or PM interns adding into an organization. I feel like they've been able to do wondrous jobs if they've used this initial time frame to ask the right questions. And I
Mhm.
think we can only emphasize on it enough uh, in order for them to understand that asking questions is not something where they could be dumped out or something, but it's
Mhm.
something where it allows them to grow along with the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying the product, I think, yeah, trying the product is I would say one of those primary things that you want to get at from day one, right? You want to be able to get those credentials to your UAT environment. You want to explore it through the lens of the customer. You want to try and understand different use cases, and I think one way of saying going about it is doing monkey testing. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of that term. So it's like going about the product without knowing the different, I would say, aspects of it, but going about it just using it as somebody who's using it for the first time. And you're going to see how you explore different areas of the product and try and understand their use cases, and also have constructive feedback on them. Now, when you give this is very important. you have to ensure that you note that feedback down and give that feedback to your manager, to your engineering manager, to all of the people that you feel like you're liaisoning with. Because at this moment in time where you have this fresh lens and you're new to office hierarchies and represent unbiasedness, it's very important that people are going to recognize you for the feedback that you give, and it's probably going to go a long way in ensuring that you understand the product from a customer point of view. And again, questions, I think we've already covered it. If I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I would use the first 55 minutes determining the proper questions to ask. Sir Einstein. So I think this just, I feel like emphasizes on the point where you want to be able to formulate questions and be able to put them forth so that you can get and there are no wrong questions. Let me put it this way. So there are no silly questions, there are no wrong questions. Just go ahead, ask them. You are going to see yourself that the answer to each question is going to keep refining the next set of questions that you have. All right. This is one of those interesting parts. Now, as you navigate through your first 90 days of product management, there are certain traps that I want you guys to avoid. I've learned it the hard way, but I want you guys to learn it through my experience. Um, one of Trap number one is you are stuck so deep in documentation that you ended up realizing that there was no real time to interact with the people or the product. People and product should be your main focus within the first 30 days. And when you get to know that, once you get in, there is a general idea that you're going to be shared a lot of resources. And maybe those resources are online, but those heaps and piles of documents, if you immerse yourself into it, and if you feel like that's all the domain expertise that you need within your first few weeks, I feel like you should take a step back, go through them gradually, but ensure that you talk to your people, you use your product hands on before you dive into the documentation and be able to make more sense of it. So this is one of those very important things that I felt I should definitely cover today. Trap number two, you're working in a silo. That's something that I feel like sort of embodies what Mudassir also said about setting expectations with your manager. There are many a times where product management, I'm very glad that at this point in time, product management is something that is now being talked about in Pakistan and has a lot of awareness. But when I started back then, there was little to no awareness of product management in Pakistan. But now that we do, uh, I've seen that when we join an organization, we have like the set of activities that we need to do. Okay, we need to look into the backlog, we need to straighten it out, we need to prepare a roadmap, we need to look at the product strategies, see what's missing. I feel like take a step back and talk to your manager as to what they expect you to do in these first 30 to 90 days. It's very important that you understand your organization's expectations, your team's expectations before you go ahead and immerse yourselves into the, I would say, a well set out, roadmap for how a PM should proceed within their first 90 days, which is why, again, going back to the disclaimer that I just started off with, the journey of a PM in its first 90 days really basically varies from organization to organization. So you do not want to end up working in a silo where at the end of the first 30 days, or maybe even worse, at the end of your first 90 days, you get to realize you are working on the wrong things, right? Trap number three, imposter syndrome. It's supposed to hit you right at the end of the first 30 days. This is something that I've experienced. Maybe if you do not uh, identify it as an imposter syndrome, I'm sure almost all of us have been through it. Am I the right person for this job? Am I doing the things right? Do I know how to carry out whatever it is that I'm doing? Why did my manager choose me for this job? I don't think I'm qualified enough. These are all questions that we ask ourselves once we are digging deep into the product, trying to make sense of it. There are certain things that we feel the development team is still working on. We feel they're irrelevant. There are too many questions popping in our head, and then we feel like we're not good enough. I think at this moment in time, it really helps if you keep small achievements um, that you make during this first 90 days within your head. So, for example, if you're helping the team setting up the sprint, right? So, if you're helping the team planning the sprint, although they were doing it previously enough, but you've introduced story point estimation that has greatly helped them, structure it a bit. You're helping the team, ensuring that an epic is being, nicely sliced into user stories, and the work items are pretty much defined for them within the sprint. Give credit to yourself for these items. Do not feel like you were not destined for it. If you weren't the right person for the job, you wouldn't have been hired. So stay there, take a deep breath, and ensure that there's a lot more to come. But whatever you're doing and at the pace that you're going, this is something that is absolutely right for you at the moment.
Yeah, I just want to add to the imposter syndrome, right? Like you said, I think we've all been there. I think especially if you're a part of a product team, you're working with other product managers, and you kind of see, at the level that they're performing. I think you need to give yourself a bit of the benefit of the doubt to say, hey, you know what, this person's been here for 2 years, 5 years, and of course, they're going to know a lot more, and they're going to be operating more smoothly than you. So just give yourself that benefit of the doubt. So you're not undermining yourself, which ultimately will impact your performance.
No, that's an excellent point. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next 30-day bucket. That's where you want to ask the question, are you headed the right direction? So now you've seen where you're headed in terms of the product direction, but now you're supposed to go a little deeper into your thought process and be able to determine whether or not it's the right direction to proceed in. How do you break it down in terms of milestones? You want to be able to take a stab at understanding your product's value proposition. What is a value proposition? We're going to come to it later. You want to be able to understand your development process. I think in the end, we should all realize that as many, key metrics as we identify product for the product, as many OKRs as we identify for the next quarter, the real impact that we could create on all of these metrics is through ensuring that we have um, a great development process and the right items are going into development, right? So you have to be invested in that area as well. The third and the most important in this next 30-day bucket would be where you ask yourself, how can you help? How can you help be a part of the process? How can you help make the process more streamlined? So on and so forth. So let's dig deep into it. Take a deeper dive into the product. And by that, I mean your value proposition is the unique advantage that your product is providing to your customers. And how do you go about understanding it? Is by talking to your customers at a deeper level. So, for example, in how I went about the stakeholder tour, even that covers a bit of talking to your customers. But now having more information and having more knowledge about the domain that you're working in, I feel it's best that you identify the right questions for your user interviews. You make sure that you do not go ahead with leading questions. You do not go about asking them about specific features and asking them how they liked them. That's called a leading question. A leading question is something where part of the question implies what the answer should be. So if you go about, how did you like feature X? You're implying that they liked feature X. At this moment in time where you really want to be understanding how the customers are using your product and what is the value that they're gaining out of it, you want to be able to go ahead and drill down into their pain by probing further into why they want to do a certain thing within the product in a certain fashion. One way of doing it that has absolutely worked wonders for me is by going on a call with them and asking them to demonstrate how they would use your product on a typical day. just by looking at the user journey, you're going to have amazing insights into what are those specific features that they gain most value out of, right? And that is going to allow you to have to build up that use case in your mind, and then you translate it into a value prop. Dig further deeper and determine the direction. Now, since you've talked to your customers, you've talked to the other stakeholders within your organization, again, customers are not the end of the game. Make sure that at each point in time when you're trying to understand if your product is going in the right direction, also try and understand the vision of the product from your leadership's point of view, right? From your management's point of view. So talk to your manager, talk to your leadership, have interviews scheduled. I think what's a given here is that I should have mentioned before is what you're doing in your next 30 days, it should be inclusive of what you've done in your first 30 days. So while you're interviewing people in your first 30 days and talking and having one-on-one conversations with stakeholders, that's something that's going to go on throughout the lifespan, and again, that is something that goes on throughout the lifespan of a product manager, right? How do you go again and then get to some conclusions? You pan out the ideas gathered from various sources, you do a quick comparative analysis. This is very important. I do realize that there might not be many resources for you to do like a full-fledged pro and con for each competitor that you have, but I would say take a first pass at it just in order for you to be able to understand which market do you are you belonging in, and what are those companies that you're competing with, right? This is going to give you a lot of insight into how they are positioning their product, where do you want your product to be positioned as, and in the competitive landscape that you are, how does your product come out? What is its unique value prop? The third and the most important is try and make sense of the current roadmap. Um, as a product manager, it's very important that you also look at the existing backlog. There was a lot of thought and I would say there was a lot of thought and structure that was put into the current roadmap. So you don't want to go ahead and create your own. Try and make sense out of the current roadmap. Talk to the engineering team. Get into deeper conversations about why a feature was laid out at the position that it was laid out at, because you also want to be able to look make sense of the priority of when something is going to be picked at, so on and so forth. I think more along those lines is something where you can go ahead and untangle your existing backlog using development buckets. That's something that has worked wonders for me. How I go about it is you use certain buckets to group together backlog items for you to be able to make sense of its value, and then prioritize it later on when you're given that uh, I think when you're expected to now go ahead and ensure that the roadmap is something that is completely under your ownership. But in order to ensure that you realize what the current backlog consists, you need to bucket some of the items into high impact. By high impact, it means the ones that are going to there are something which are high, um, which are very demanding in terms of what the customer wants. They are going to result in their revenue generating features. So for example, a feature that allows you to introduce a referral program within the product, right? Now, these are high impact features because the revenue that you estimate that to generate for the product is high. Client requests is again one of those buckets that are very important for you to keep in view of, because there are certain and this comes really into play for B2B clients. When there's an enterprise client who wants a certain feature to be implemented and they've been working with you for so long, then from a customer relationship management standpoint, you really need to ensure that is under your radar. Support, bugs and fixes, and then technical debt. um, you want to be able to plan your sprints. And again, this is not something that you're supposed to do in the next, I mean, in the first 60 days within your tenure. But from a future standpoint, you want to carry out this initial activity, and you want to bucket these items, so that later on, when you're planning sprints or preparing a priority map, as I like to call it, you make sure that you prioritize the items based on the business value of each of them.
Yeah, I think that's a Sarah, great point of untangling your existing backlog. I think the mistake some people make often is they'll come in guns blazing, right? Like they'll look at the product, they'll get overexcited, they'll be like, "Oh, I have this great idea," and to your point, ignore all the work that has gone into the existing backlog, and then in the process, end up harming those relationships with those people who put in those efforts to create that backlog, right? So, and I think great point here to kind of prioritize the different things in your backlog, and again, you have the option to ask why during this time period as well. Like, why is this high impact? Which client have requested it? Are they a high priority client, et cetera, et cetera. So nobody's going to fault you for answering or asking those questions. So
Absolutely makes sense. I think, following up on what you exactly said, extend help by empathizing why they're currently doing things the way they are. I think it's very disruptive, where there are new team members that come in, and what they try to do is, they introduce change without considering why something was put into place. The first time it was. I think that is counterproductive, rather than taking you leaps ahead. You need to extend help by understanding why the processes are the way they are, by digging problems the team is currently facing, by creating more alignment within the team as well as with management, and by allowing them enough space to get comfortable with the change, right? So it's very important that you go ahead and introduce a change, in the backlog, in the platform, in the system, in the process, when you have everyone's buy-in. Otherwise, you're doing yourself more harm than good, right? So 100% on what you said earlier, and this is exactly what's the trap for the first 60 days. You're introducing changes to the backlog without getting everyone's buy-in. There's this way a good quote on that, where Jerry says, showing up to your new gig and immediately bashing long established norms will backfire. And that, I think we've covered enough on it, but I feel like there's an opportunity for us to realize, as PMs, because when we get into a team, I think our position allows us to make a lot of authoritative decisions. And I think that's one of those, I'm sorry. And I think that's one of those, I would say, blurry lines where we sometimes forget that introducing change is not the final result that we want to be producing. The outcome that we want to get is creating alignment and going about the right direction in which the product as well as the teams grow together. All right, perfect. um Coming to our last 30 days of joining a new organization, the important question that you should now be asking is, where should you go in order to reach why? So now, it's more like you've figured out the basics of what the product is, how does it work, who are your customers, but you want to be able to understand what is it that the product needs to get to a better standpoint. And by why, it doesn't really mean that at this point you've figured out your North Star metric, or by this time you've set like a unachievable goal for yourself, and you feel like within this last 30 days of your 90 days cap, you want to be able to take the rocket ship higher. But what it means is that you want to be able to identify what are those changes that you could make, and what is the room for improvement within your product. So understanding key metrics, again, one of the milestones that you should be able to get through, and driving product development. I think this has worked really well for me in the past, where I have taken the first 60 days really slow, kept my entire focus on people and product. And after I got a good understanding of the product, I maintained an excellent rapport with my colleagues. That's when I moved on to the last bit, which was the process. And then looking at the process, being able to identify the loopholes within the process, and um, constructively suggesting what we could do better, was as easy as ABC, because the team now knew that I was one of them, and what I was actually doing was helping them straighten out the system, so that our deployments could be streamlined, our product development could be streamlined, so on and so forth. So you want to be able to create that alignment within the team first, before you go ahead and get the processes, and go about introducing any of the changes. In your last 30-day bucket, I think it's very helpful that you go ahead and try and take a first stab at this lean business model. The first thing that you want to start off with is customer segment. You want to be able to understand where does your customer belong, um, their persona, their age, their the demographic, what are the hobbies and interests of your customers, why are they using your product, so on and so forth. The next thing that you want to be focusing on is the problem that your customer base is facing, which is why